First contact. John Carter stared at the screen in disbelief. The pattern wasn't random noise as he had initially thought. There was structure to it, mathematical precision that couldn't occur naturally. "Hey, Diane, can you take a look at this?" John called to his colleague across the NASA communications lab. Diane Rodriguez pushed away from her desk and rolled her chair over. "What am I looking at, John?" "I've been monitoring this signal for 3 days. It repeats exactly the same way every 4 hours and 17 minutes. Diane's eyes widened as she studied the waveform. "That's definitely not one of ours." Within hours, every major observatory on Earth had directed their equipment toward the signal source, somewhere in the vicinity of the Andromeda Galaxy. The pattern continued, unchanging and persistent. After a week of analysis, a team of cryptographers made the breakthrough. The signal contained a mathematical key that allowed for the decryption of a much larger data package embedded within it. "It's a message," announced Dr. Peter Wilson to the hastily assembled group of scientists and government officials. "We've translated about 30% so far, but the meaning is clear. They call themselves the Solarian Empire." Susan Miller, recently appointed Director of Global Defense, leaned forward. Her normally composed face showed rare tension. "What exactly do they want?" Dr. Wilson hesitated. "They're coming to Earth. They describe themselves as a civilization spanning hundreds of galaxies. They use terms like integration and resource allocation when referring to our planet." The room fell silent. "They're not asking permission," Susan said flatly. It wasn't a question. "No, they're not." Within days, the United Nations convened an emergency session. For the first time in human history, every nation set aside their differences in the face of a threat that made their earthly conflicts seem meaningless. The Planetary Defense Council was formed with representatives from every major power. Susan Miller was unanimously elected as its head. "We need to understand exactly what we're facing," Susan told the assembled leaders in her first address. "The message indicates their scouts will arrive within months, with their main fleet following a year later." "What do they mean by integration?" asked the French president. "Based on further translations, they view Earth as a resource-rich planet with a primitive species that can be utilized for labor and experimentation," Susan replied grimly. "They don't consider us equals. We're simply another world to add to their collection." Back at NASA, John worked around the clock with an international team to decipher more of the message. The deeper they delved, the clearer their predicament became. "They've done this thousands of times before," John told Susan during their daily briefing. "They have a standard procedure for planetary acquisition. First scouts, then diplomats who offer terms of surrender, then occupation if terms aren't accepted." "Do they mention any civilization ever successfully resisting?" John shook his head. "No. From what we can tell, resistance isn't even a concept they address. It's like they've never encountered it." 3 months later, long-range telescopes detected objects moving at impossible speeds toward the solar system. The scouts had arrived. Susan stood at the window of the PDC headquarters, watching the night sky. Somewhere up there, alien eyes were studying their world, calculating its value, planning its future. "Director Miller," her assistant called from the doorway. "The president is on the line." Susan took a deep breath. "Tell him I'll be right there." As she walked to the secure communications room, Susan made a silent promise to herself and to Earth. This would not be another successful conquest for the Solarian Empire. Humanity might seem primitive to these galactic invaders, but they were about to learn that appearances could be deceiving. Navy Commander Patrick Walsh peered through the specialized telescope aboard the submarine U.S. Vigilant. The vessel floated silently in the North Atlantic, one of 6 submarines positioned strategically around the globe. Their mission: observe the Solarian scout ships without being detected. "Anything new?" asked Lieutenant Grace Hoffman, his second in command. "They're holding position above the Arctic," Patrick replied. "Same as yesterday." The alien vessels had arrived 3 weeks ago, sleek, dark objects that defied radar detection and moved with unnatural precision. 7 scout ships had taken up positions around Earth, methodically scanning the planet's surface, atmosphere, and oceans. "We're getting data from the Chinese submarine in the Pacific," Grace said, handing him a tablet. "Their scout ship is deploying smaller objects into the ocean." Patrick studied the footage with growing concern. "Sampling probes. They're taking inventory of our resources." Back at PTC headquarters, Susan Miller reviewed the reports from all observation teams. The Accelarians showed no interest in communication. They simply continued their survey, ignoring all attempts at contact. "We need to understand what they're looking for specifically," Susan told her advisors. "Dr. Daniels, what's your assessment?" Dr. Lisa Daniels, the lead cynobiologist on the council, pulled up her analysis. "Based on their sampling patterns, they're primarily interested in our biological diversity, mineral resources, and water. They've paid special attention to population centers, suggesting they're evaluating us as well." "Evaluating us for what?" asked General Howard Bennett. "Labor, most likely," Lisa replied. "The message indicated they consider us primitive but physically capable. Their technological level suggests they could automate most processes, so wanting manual labor implies they see some specific value in using sentient beings." The meeting was interrupted when an aide rushed in. "Director Miller, one of the scout ships has crashed in northern Canada." Within hours, a joint U.S.-Canadian Special Forces team secured the crash site. The ship had suffered catastrophic failure during a storm. Whether from lightning or some other atmospheric phenomenon remained unclear. Dr. Ryan Foster, head of the newly formed Alien Technology Division, led the research team examining the wreckage. "It's incredible," he reported during an emergency PTC briefing. "Their technology operates on principles we've only theorized about. But we've managed to access what appears to be a database." The recovered information painted a grim picture. The Accelarian Empire had conquered thousands of civilizations across multiple galaxies. Their standard procedure was efficient and ruthless. Evaluation, invasion, subjugation, resource extraction, and then abandonment once a planet was depleted. "There's no mention of any significant military resistance," Ryan continued. "Most civilizations surrender after witnessing their technological superiority." General Bennett studied the Accelarian military capabilities with growing despair. "Their weapons systems are centuries beyond ours. Conventional defense would be suicide." "What about nuclear options?" someone asked. "Based on this data, they have defensive capabilities that would neutralize nuclear weapons before impact," Ryan answered. "And their retaliatory measures would be devastating." Patrick Walsh was recalled to headquarters to share his direct observations. After the briefing, he found Susan alone in her office, staring at satellite images of the scout ships. "We can't fight them conventionally," she admitted, "but we have to find a way to resist." "There might be something," Patrick said hesitantly. "We've noticed fluctuations in their scanning patterns when they pass over certain geological formations, almost like interference." Susan looked up sharply. "What kind of formations?" "Areas with high concentrations of rare earth elements, particularly around quantum research facilities." For the first time in weeks, Susan felt a glimmer of hope. "Get me everything you have on those fluctuations, and contact Professor Alan Wright at Quantum Physics Institute. Tell him it's an emergency." As Patrick left, Susan turned back to the window. The scouts were just the beginning. The main fleet would arrive in 8 months. Somehow, in that time, humanity needed to find a weakness in an enemy that had never known defeat. Professor Alan Wright hadn't slept in 3 days. His lab at the Quantum Physics Institute was now a restricted military zone, filled with both his regular research team and government scientists working around the clock. "The data doesn't make sense," he muttered, staring at the readings from the crashed Accelarian ship. "Their technology should work better here, not worse." Kate Robinson, his research assistant, looked up from her computer. "What if it's not about their technology failing? What if it's about our planet being different?" Alan paused, then rushed to the quantum measurement array. "Kate, you're brilliant. We've been looking at this all wrong. For years, Alan had been studying anomalies in Earth's quantum field, tiny variations that most scientists dismissed as measurement errors. But now, comparing these readings to the Accelerian technology specifications, a pattern emerged. Earth has a unique quantum signature, Alan explained to Susan Miller 2 days later. It's subtle, but fundamentally different from what the Accelerians are used to. Their technology is optimized for the standard quantum field that exists across most of the universe. Can we use this difference somehow? Susan asked. Theoretically, yes. We could develop a system that amplifies our quantum anomaly, creating a field that would disrupt their technology. Alan hesitated, but the energy requirements would be enormous. Within a week, Project Safeguard was established in a remote facility deep in the Rocky Mountains. Scientists and engineers from around the world were brought in, many not knowing the full scope of what they were working on. Alan and Kate led the theoretical team, while engineers worked to build a device that could harness and amplify Earth's quantum signature. Progress was rapid but challenging. The equations suggest it's possible, Kate explained during a breakthrough moment. But the power requirements are beyond anything we've ever generated. How much power are we talking about? Asked Colonel Frank Harris, the military commander assigned to the project. Nearly the entire electrical output of North America for several minutes, Alan replied grimly. Despite the challenges, the team pressed on. As the weeks passed, a massive device took shape in the mountain facility, a quantum amplifier that could theoretically create a disruption field affecting any technology not native to Earth's unique quantum environment. We can only fire it once, Alan warned during a progress briefing. The stress on the system would be too great for multiple uses. Once might be enough, Susan responded, if we can make it count. The real breakthrough came when Kate discovered that the quantum disruption could be focused and directed, much like a beam. We won't need to affect the entire Accelerian fleet, she explained excitedly. We can target specific ships or even project the effect to a demonstration location. Tests using salvaged Accelerian technology confirmed their theory. When exposed to the amplified quantum field, alien devices simply stopped functioning. More surprising was what happened at higher intensity levels. Matter itself became unstable, as if the very laws of physics were being locally rewritten. It's not just a weapon, Alan told Susan during her inspection of the completed device. It's like nothing humanity has ever created before. We're essentially manipulating reality itself. The massive machine filled an entire mountain cavern, with cooling systems extending through miles of underground tunnels. Power lines from across the continent had been secretly modified to channel energy to the facility when needed. As they stood before the quantum amplifier, Susan felt both hope and dread. Can it really stop them? This device can do more than stop them, Alan said quietly. At full power, it could erase their ships from existence. But we need to be careful. We're dealing with forces we barely understand. Outside the facility, the world continued unaware of both the threat and the possible salvation being prepared. The Accelerian scout ships completed their survey and departed Earth's orbit, presumably to report back to the main fleet. The countdown had begun. Earth had one weapon, one chance, and less than 5 months to prepare. The Accelerian diplomatic vessel entered Earth's atmosphere with deliberate slowness, allowing Earth's tracking systems to follow its descent. Unlike the utilitarian scout ships, this craft gleamed with ornate designs that spoke of power and authority. It landed on the specially prepared field outside the United Nations headquarters in New York. News cameras from around the world captured the historic moment as the first official representatives of an alien civilization set foot on Earth. Ambassador Zolthrak emerged first, nearly 7 feet tall with iridescent blue skin that shifted patterns with each movement. 2 assistants followed, carrying ceremonial staffs that hummed with energy. Mary Winters, the newly appointed UN representative for extraterrestrial relations, stepped forward to greet them. A former diplomat with decades of experience in international negotiations, Mary had been selected for her calm demeanor and strategic mind. "On behalf of Earth, I welcome you," Mary said, following the careful script prepared by the PDC. Zolthrak studied her with 6 golden eyes that blinked in sequence. "The Xilarian Empire acknowledges your greeting." The ambassador replied in perfect English, the words somehow forming without visible mouth movements. "We come to discuss the terms of your integration." The meeting moved to the General Assembly Hall, modified to accommodate the Xilarian delegation's environmental needs. World leaders and representatives watched with tense expressions as the proceedings began. "Integration into the Empire is an honor granted to few worlds," Zolthrak announced. "Your resources will serve the greater expansion, and your people will be elevated to serve useful functions within our hierarchy." Mary maintained a pleasant expression. "We're interested in learning more about these functions before making any decisions." The ambassador's skin patterns shifted to a sharper configuration. "Decision. There is no decision. Integration is mandatory. We merely offer the courtesy of explaining the process." The Xilarian assistants displayed holographic images of other worlds now part of their empire, once thriving civilizations reduced to resource extraction colonies. "These terms seem quite one-sided," Mary observed calmly. "Surely there's room for a more mutually beneficial arrangement." Zolthrak tilted his elongated head. "You misunderstand. This meeting is not a negotiation. It is an explanation of what will occur when our fleet arrives in 74 of your days." Throughout the exchange, Mary noticed something unexpected: confusion in the ambassador's mannerisms. The Xilarians had clearly anticipated fear, perhaps pleading, but humanity's measured response seemed to unsettle them. During a break in the proceedings, Zolthrak approached Mary privately. "Your people show unusual composure. Most species respond with panic or worship when facing integration." Mary smiled. "Humans are adaptable. We prefer to understand situations fully before reacting. In the Empire's expansion across 12 galaxies, we have never encountered resistance that lasted more than one planetary rotation," Zolthrak stated, the words carrying an unmistakable threat. "That's fascinating," Mary replied. "Your empire must have a rich history." Later that evening, Mary reported to the PDC via secure channel. "They're confused by our lack of fear. I believe this gives us an advantage. They've never faced a species that didn't immediately surrender." Susan nodded. "Keep them talking. We need more time." The diplomatic meetings continued for days. The Xilarians outlined their plans for Earth in clinical detail: resource extraction zones, human processing centers, planetary restructuring projects. On the 5th day, Mary made a formal request. "My people need time to prepare for such significant changes. We request 30 days to inform our population and make necessary arrangements before formal integration begins." Zolthrak consulted with his assistants in their musical language before responding. "This is unprecedented. Integration typically begins immediately upon first contact." "Earth is an unprecedented world," Mary replied. 30 days will allow for a smoother transition and less disruption to the resources you value." After considerable debate among the Xilarian delegation, Zolthrak finally agreed. 30 days are granted. Our main fleet will hold position at the edge of your solar system until this preparation period concludes." As the ambassador returned to his ship, Mary contacted Susan with the news. "We've bought some time," she said quietly. "Let's hope it's enough." Colonel Frank Harris stood in the control center of Project Safeguard, watching dozens of scientists and engineers work with urgent precision. The massive underground facility hummed with energy as systems were tested and calibrated. "Status report," he demanded, turning to Alan Wright. "We're at 82% completion," Alan replied, his eyes red from lack of sleep. "The quantum matrix is stable, but we're still working on the targeting system." "We have 18 days left," Frank reminded him. "The fleet will enter striking range in 19. The colonel moved through the facility, checking on each team's progress. The project had expanded dramatically in the past weeks. 5 underground levels housed different components of the massive weapon, with power conduits connecting to modified electrical grids across the continent. Kate Robinson led the targeting team, working to ensure the quantum disruption could be precisely directed. "The problem isn't hitting what we aim at," she explained to Frank. "It's controlling exactly what happens when we do." Meaning? At full power, we don't just disable their ships. We could potentially erase them from existence. But the effect might cascade beyond our target if we're not careful. Frank nodded grimly. "Keep working on precision. We need options." Above ground, the world continued largely unaware of the true danger. Governments had released limited information about the Xelarian contact, describing it as peaceful diplomatic exchange. Few knew that an invasion fleet waited just beyond Mars. Inside a separate wing of the facility, civilian engineer Olivia Pearson had been brought in for her expertise in power grid management. "The current design will cause widespread blackouts across North America," she told Susan Miller during an inspection, "possibly cascading failures throughout the global power network." "Can you fix it?" Susan asked. "Not fix, exactly. But I can build a stabilization system that would restore power within hours instead of days," Olivia explained. "We'd still need to essentially borrow the entire continent's electrical output for approximately 3 minutes. "Do it," Susan ordered, "but keep it quiet. The public can't know about this." As the deadline approached, world leaders were secretly briefed on the plan. The response was mixed. Some believed surrender might be safer than risking the Xelarians' wrath if the weapon failed. "We get one shot at this," Susan told the Emergency Council. "If it works, we demonstrate that humanity cannot be conquered. If it fails..." No one needed her to finish the sentence. In orbit, satellite imagery showed the Xelarian fleet had grown. Over 200 ships now positioned themselves in a holding pattern, waiting for the diplomatic period to end. Back at Project Safeguard, Alan made a breakthrough with the quantum matrix stabilizer. "We've solved the containment issue," he announced to the team. "The effect will be limited to our target area only." "And you're sure this will work?" Frank asked. Alan exchanged glances with Kate. "In theory, yes. But we can't test it at full power without revealing our capability to the Xelarians." With just 5 days remaining, final preparations began. Power companies were quietly instructed to prepare for a system test that would require special protocols. Military units worldwide were placed on alert under the guise of exercises. Olivia completed the grid stabilization system just in time. "It will still be painful," she warned Susan. 3 minutes of total blackout across most of the Northern Hemisphere. Hospitals and critical infrastructure have backup generators, but it will cause panic." "Better than the alternative," Susan replied. On the eve of the deadline, Frank gathered the core team. "Tomorrow, we either save our planet or we fail. Either way, what you've accomplished here is remarkable. Humanity faced an impossible threat, and instead of giving up, you built something that might just save us all." As night fell, the massive weapon waited silently beneath the mountains. Above, in the star-filled sky, the Xelarian fleet began to move, breaking their holding pattern and advancing toward Earth. The time for diplomacy had ended. The time for humanity's one and only warning was about to begin. Mary Winters stood before the Xelarian delegation in the United Nations chamber, her expression calm despite the gravity of the moment. The 30-day period had expired. "Ambassador Zolthrak, I regret to inform you that Earth cannot accept your terms of integration," she announced. The ambassador's skin patterns flickered with what appeared to be amusement. "Your acceptance is not required. It was merely a courtesy to explain the process before it begins." On the main view screen, satellite imagery showed the Xelarian fleet advancing from its holding position, hundreds of ships moving in perfect formation toward Earth. "Before your fleet arrives, we have a message to convey," Mary said. "A demonstration we believe you should witness." Zolthrak's 6 eyes blinked in sequence. "There is nothing you could demonstrate that would alter the Empire's plans. In the control center of Project Safeguard, Susan Miller gave the final authorization. Commence Operation Deterrent. Colonel Frank Harris nodded to Alan Wright. Start the sequence. Alan's fingers moved across the control panel, initiating the startup process. The facility rumbled as massive machinery engaged. Power levels began to rise as the quantum amplifier drew energy from the grid. Power at 20% and climbing, Kate reported. All systems nominal. Across North America, lights dimmed as electricity was diverted to the facility. Power companies implemented the emergency protocols, rerouting energy to maintain critical services while allowing the massive drain. Target coordinates locked, Olivia announced, focusing on the uninhabited moon Callisto in the Jupiter system. In the UN chamber, Mary gestured to the screen. Please direct your attention to the fourth moon of Jupiter. The Solarian delegation turned to watch, their posture suggesting bored tolerance rather than concern. At Project Safeguard, the power levels reached critical threshold. 95%, Kate called out. Matrix stability holding. Alan took a deep breath, initiating quantum displacement field in 3, 2, 1. The facility shook violently as the weapon discharged. For 3 minutes, darkness swept across cities throughout North America as every watt of power flowed into the quantum amplifier. In space, an invisible wave of distorted reality shot outward from Earth, traveling faster than light toward the designated target. When it reached Callisto, the effect was immediate and devastating. The moon didn't explode. It didn't break apart. It simply ceased to exist, erased from reality as if it had never been there. Where Callisto had orbited for billions of years, there was now only empty space. In the UN chamber, gasps filled the room. The Exilarian delegates rose to their feet, skin patterns shifting rapidly in what was clearly alarm. "What have you done?" Zolthrak demanded, his usual composure shattered. Mary's expression remained unchanged. "We've demonstrated a fraction of our defensive capability." The communication system chimed as a priority message came through from Susan Miller. Mary nodded, and Susan's face appeared on the screen. "Ambassador Zolthrak," Susan addressed the alien directly. "What you have just witnessed is Earth's first and only warning. The same technology can be directed at your fleet with equal effect." The ambassador's assistants were frantically communicating with their ships, the musical language now sharp and dissonant with urgency. "This is impossible," Zolthrak stated. "No primitive species has ever possessed such capability." "Yet here we are," Mary replied. "Our message is simple and will not be repeated." On the screen, Susan delivered humanity's ultimatum. "Leave now. We will not ask twice." In orbit, the Exilarian fleet had halted its advance. Ships began to adjust position, moving back from Earth in evident reassessment. At Project Safeguard, the team watched as power systems gradually recovered. The quantum amplifier, having fired its singular shot, cooled in its massive housing. "Did it work?" Frank asked, looking at the tactical displays showing the alien fleet's movements. Alan nodded slowly. "They'd stopped advancing. Now we wait to see if they believe we could do it again." As cities across Earth slowly regained power, humanity held its collective breath. The Exilarian Empire had never encountered resistance in its long history of conquest. Today, that changed. For 3 days, the Exilarian fleet remained motionless at the edge of Earth's solar system. No messages were transmitted. No ships advanced or retreated. The world waited in tense silence. On the 4th day, a single vessel detached from the fleet and approached Earth. It wasn't the ornate diplomatic craft, but a smaller utilitarian ship that took up position in high orbit. "They're requesting direct communication with our leadership," Mary informed the Emergency Council. "No intermediaries." In the secure underground bunker that now served as PDC headquarters, Susan Miller prepared to face the Exilarians. Screens showed the alien vessel maintaining its position, scanning active but weapons dormant. The communication system activated, revealing Ambassador Zolthrak. His skin patterns were subdued, the shifting colors muted. The Xelarian High Command requires information, the ambassador stated without preamble. How did your species acquire quantum erasure technology? Susan had been prepared for this question. We didn't acquire it. We developed it naturally, as an extension of Earth's unique properties. Impossible. Such technology requires evolutionary pathways that span millions of years. Perhaps that is true for other worlds, Susan replied. Earth has always been different. The ambassador was silent for a moment, his 6 eyes blinking in that strange, sequential pattern. Our analysts have confirmed the complete absence of Callisto. No debris. No energy signature. Total erasure from the universal constant. Yes. And you claim the capability to direct this effect toward our fleet. Susan nodded. We do not wish to use it again, but we will if necessary. The communication paused as Zolthrak evidently consulted with his superiors. When he returned, his demeanor had changed subtly. The Imperial Council has made a determination, he announced. Earth is to be classified as a sovereign anomaly, a designation given only twice before in our history. What does that mean exactly? Susan asked. Your world will remain independent. The Empire will establish a boundary zone around your solar system that no Imperial vessels will cross without explicit permission. The relief in the room was palpable, but Susan maintained her composure. And the other worlds in your empire? Will they be granted similar sovereignty? This designation applies only to Earth, Zolthrak stated firmly. Your quantum signature makes you unique. After the communication ended, celebrations erupted across PDC headquarters. Earth had faced an overwhelming threat and somehow emerged victorious. But Susan quieted the room quickly. This isn't over, she reminded them. We've kept them at bay for now, but we've also revealed ourselves as a potential threat. We need to prepare for the future. In the following months, Project Safeguard was expanded. While the original quantum device had burned out after its single use, the knowledge gained allowed for the development of smaller, more efficient versions. William Barnes, formerly a colonel in the Air Force Space Command, was appointed to lead the newly formed Stellar Guardians, an international force tasked with developing Earth's capabilities beyond the solar system. We need to establish our presence, we'll explain during the first planning session. Not as conquerors, but as equals on the galactic stage. 6 months after the Xelarian retreat, humanity launched its first faster-than-light probe, utilizing principles learned from the alien technology. A year later, the first human vessel capable of interstellar travel was completed. On the anniversary of what became known as the Deterrent Day, Susan addressed the United Nations. 1 year ago, humanity stood on the brink of subjugation. Today, we stand at the threshold of a new era. The universe is vast and filled with civilizations both benevolent and dangerous. The Xelarians will not be the last to test us. Intelligence gathered from monitoring distant communications revealed that the Xelarian Empire had added a new protocol to their military doctrine. The Earth Protocol instructed Imperial forces to perform extensive analysis before approaching any seemingly primitive civilization. As Earth's first interstellar ship prepared for its maiden voyage, Captain Laura Bennett looked out at her crew, scientists, diplomats, and security personnel from nations across the planet, united in purpose. Our mission is exploration and peaceful contact, she told them. But we carry with us the lesson of the Xelarian encounter. Never underestimate a determined species fighting for its home. The ship departed Earth orbit, carrying humanity's hopes and ambitions to the stars. Behind them, their blue planet continued its quiet revolution around an ordinary yellow sun, no longer just another world awaiting conquest, but a power that had earned its place among the stars.